Hey friends, I hope you're doing well. So yesterday I talked about something that my teacher in high school taped to her TV, and it was two words, and it was question everything. I was thinking about the conversation I had with my friend earlier that I talked about on Monday. And there was something that came out of our conversation that was two words, and that I felt like, okay, this is something that I need to write on big font on a piece of paper and like paste it somewhere that I'm going to see it every single day, because this is the lesson and this is the thing that I need to be reminded of all the time, because I just forget. And that is be unreasonable. So I'm going to do a little bit of a backstory and why I think that this is such a useful life mantra to live by. And it does have something to do with what we were talking about yesterday in terms of consensus bias. Because if you do what's reasonable all the time, you're going to do a really great job of fitting into the status quo and fitting into the herd. But the reality is that if you want to do something of value and achieve something of if you want to change something, if you want to change the world in your own way, then there's a little bit of a perceived craziness in that. People are usually think you're a little nuts if you do something different until it becomes accepted as normal. So you look at people like, I'm not comparing myself to these people by any stretch, but if you think about people like Elon Musk or people who are actually like movers and shakers and really transforming our perception of reality, these people are also, perceived by some as crazy. They're being unreasonable. He is super unreasonable to think about, okay, well, what about like going to Mars? That's like an unreasonable thing to think about. But yet that's exactly how doing things like going to Mars gets figured out. So when I was younger, so when I was about 25 years old, I went to culinary school. And that culminated in like some really cool experiences. And I ended up moving to Toronto and working in a kitchen. Because as one does, when you put your time and money and energy into something, whether it's a degree or some kind of training, of course you think, okay, well, naturally the next step is to apply this training. So I was at the kitchen and I was working long days and long nights sometimes, doing menial labor, listening to a lot of CBC radio while I chopped endless boxes of sweet potatoes and broccoli and whatever else. It wasn't a bad job. It was, some people would have thought it was a fabulous job. Unfortunately, I was not one of those people. I hated it. I hated, I'll use different terminology, but I refer to myself as a kitchen person that starts with a B, because that's what it felt like. And I had previously been teaching piano at a music school. And while I worked for a school, I had a decent amount of autonomy in that job. The things that I did, I felt like had impact. I was able to connect with kids and do things that felt meaningful. And then to go from that to chopping sweet potatoes all day long and making meals for people felt like a really big downgrade in terms of my own personal autonomy. My pay wasn't good, and I was doing work that I wasn't unique in that situation. I could have been anyone. I was super replaceable, and I felt it and I hated it. So the thing about living in Toronto is that it's expensive. So me and my partner were just trying to navigate that and just be able to afford our rent and live in this expensive city, the city that we moved to, on pure hopes and dreams, thinking like, what a lovely experience to live in a big city. But then, of course, the crushing reality being like, it's really hard to live in this city when you go there with no job and you're like an idealistic 25-year-old. So anyway, it was difficult to make ends meet. But so the reasonable thing to do would have been to keep going to the job that I hated, because even if it was tough to make ends meet, it was still money. It was some money as opposed to no money. But I decided to do the unreasonable thing. I decided to quit. And without much notice, don't recommend doing that. Not usually a good way to build bridges. That's how you burn bridges. But anyways, I did what I did. I quit. And that didn't go over well with my partner. understandably really like nervous and upset about what that meant. I was nervous about what that meant. Were we going to be destitute? Were we going to be able to pay rent next month? All those kinds of things came up. It was really, really unreasonable to quit. But the way I was reasoning it, it was unreasonable to be crying in my car every time I drove home. It was unreasonable to feel like my life was didn't have any meaning or value to anyone, that I wasn't contributing to anyone, that I wasn't doing something that had any purpose. Because what was I doing with this? Was I trying to like ascend the ladder and I don't know, open up my own restaurant or something? No, I didn't know what I was doing. I was just taking on whatever job would take me. It had no significance to my greater life purpose. And I feel like whatever my greater life purpose was, and I didn't know what it was at the time, I felt like it was being squandered in that environment. So that felt unreasonable to me. To be miserable felt unreasonable to me. And of course, there's all kinds of rationalizations you could make. Okay, well, maybe just tolerate it for another year or two, or all these coping mechanisms to act as a Band-Aid over the life that you really just kind of despise. And I wasn't going to do that. That would have been the reasonable thing to do, but I wasn't going to do that. And what I ended up doing instead was putting up all kinds of advertisements on Kijiji and on street lamps, and like posting, like actual paper posting bulletins about being a piano teacher. And I started teaching people basically like a week after. I got people who were interested right away in having me come to their homes and teach them piano. And within 3 or 4 months, I had a full schedule. And that worked out really well. So it wasn't a disaster. I was forced into fast action. I was like, okay, I need to do something. I just quit a job. So now I really need to hustle and figure this out. And I figured it out. And if I never would have done that, I might not have been a piano teacher in Toronto, which gave me all kinds of interesting experiences and opportunities that eventually led me to creating my Piano TV YouTube channel. So I think about it as like, okay, that unreasonable decision to quit my job ended up basically manifesting as what is my business now. And I'm so glad in that moment that I made the unreasonable decision. Now, a thing that I'm thinking about currently and why this is coming up and why my friend told me be unreasonable and why this came up as a mantra or an idea to post on a big piece of paper in front of my face is just my desire to drop things from my life right now. So that includes things like social media. It even maybe possibly somewhat, I'm not sure yet, includes this TV behind me. Just getting rid of things that feel like 6s and 7s. I want my life to be filled with 8s, 9s, and 10s. And that includes relationships. That includes the ways I spend my time and the way that I engage with my business and so on. I don't want to have 6s and 7s in my life. I don't want to do things that I only kind of half enjoy. So if I'm thinking about television, I'm like, okay, it would be really weird and unusual and annoying. It would be difficult to take this TV down and put it in storage. Then I have to find something to fill the space, like maybe a picture or something. It all seems very challenging and annoying and unreasonable. It's like, why do I need to do that? I watch the TV maybe 3 times a week. Maybe for like half an hour to an hour at a time. I like watching movies sometimes. It's not like I hate TV. But if I think about it, I get really interested and curious. What would it be like? Just even as an experiment. It doesn't have to be permanent. This is all reversible. But what would it be like if I didn't have a TV in my living room? And there's something about that idea that I find very attractive. But then the fear of being unreasonable sets in. And I'm like, oh no. What will I do? What if it's like all this FOMO starts coming in? What if there's a new show or like a movie that I really want to watch or something? It's like, okay, well, calm down, self. I can watch things on my laptop still if absolutely needed. I have another TV in the house. This isn't even the only one, but yet my internal dialogue starts like freaking out. It's like, no, Allysia, you don't need to do that. Just chill out. You don't need to do the extreme thing. But is this thing behind me bringing value to my life? Okay, I could say it's bringing value to a level of like maybe it's a 6 or 7 out of 10. It's not something that is an 8, 9, or 10 out of 10. And the reason that I say that is I don't feel any passion towards it. I don't feel any excitement towards it. The only time I watch TV is like, okay, it's dinner and I want to watch something. I don't really, it's easy. But it's not like I'm like, yeah, let's watch TV. It's going to be great. It's more like, I don't know what else to do, so I'm going to watch TV. That is the difference between like a 7 and an 8 to me. An 8 is something that's a little bit more active. It's like, I'm choosing this and I'm lit up by this. A 7 is something like, it's okay. It's like, not the best, but it's certainly not the worst. It's pretty good. It's pretty good. And do I want my life to be full of things that I think are like pretty good? It's kind of a Marie Kondo idea, you know, like the magic, life-changing magic of tidying up. Kind of a, does this object bring you joy? And if this shirt or whatever does not, or book or object does not bring you joy, get rid of it. And don't surround yourself in your environment of things that you just feel like ho-hum about, because then you'll just end up feeling ho-hum. So it's kind of a similar idea here. I'm thinking, I'm just looking around in my life. Like, okay, does Facebook feel like an 8, 9, or 10 out of 10 for me? What about Twitter? What about my TV? What about doing a ton of email correspondence in my business? All of these things, when I'm thinking about them, it's not that I don't want to do emails or that I'm trying to never do emails again. But in terms of the value that I bring to people in the world, or the people who I teach, the main value I'm delivering is the content I'm creating. So my videos and my courses. So of course it makes sense if I'm feeling like emails are like a 4 or a 5 for me, that I would reduce them as much as I possibly can to allow space for the things that I think actually that are unreplaceable, where I am unreplaceable. Because I could hire someone to answer emails for me. Email is not the thing that is the most Allysia. It is not the way for me to bring the most Allysia into the world. So I want to minimize those things. And the same goes, so what would I do if I didn't have a TV in my living room? Matt, now that I'm talking about this, it's making me a little nervous because I'm like, if you guys keep seeing in this video my TV on the wall week after week, then maybe I'm just talk. But I'm really feeling pulled to be unreasonable. What would it be like? What would I do if I didn't have a TV in the middle of my living room? I would have to put up some kind of print, painting, poster, or something. Otherwise it's just going to be this big, ugly space in the wall with like holes in it from when the TV was hanging up. So I have to think this through a little bit. But what would I do? Would I have more conversations? We don't really, so I don't really use it with my kids, so that wouldn't really end up changing anything there. Would I end up reading more? How would I fill those moments of time where I'm like, might as well watch TV? What would I do instead? Would it improve the quality of my life? Would I feel more like the time I was spending watching TV, which might have been like a 7? Sometimes I really like watching movies and stuff, so sometimes it's more than a 7, but usually it's like a 7. Would that end up being transformed into something that's more like an 8, 9, or 10? Or not. I don't know if it's an experiment, but this is the thing that I'm currently thinking about. I'm about an inch away from getting rid of my Facebook account. These are the things that I like to think about. What would my mom say? Like if I was having a conversation with my mom, she'd be like, she'd just like give me a little bit of a look like, why are you doing that? That's kind of ridiculous, Allysia. And that's when I know that I'm hitting on something, as long as I'm not just being ridiculous for no reason. It is for a big reason. Like it's for the reason of having more value and alignment in my life, getting rid of the things that are just there because it's convenient for them to be there. It's easy, it's simple, it's like it's very ho-hum. I want to get rid of the ho-hum. It's not just meaningless unreasonableness. So that's an important thing to say. And I just want to leave on this note, there's something very freeing about the times where I've chosen to be unreasonable, even though it's very, very scary from a social perspective. To like quit the job or change paths or like any of these big steps is really scary socially, or like people are going to think I'm nuts, and that is really uncomfortable to deal with. But one thing that I think about is Radiohead, and this is the way that I'm going to cap off this video today, is when Radiohead released the album OK Computer in, I think, 1997. It was a smash hit. It changed the landscape of rock music, and it really boosted their fame and popularity as not just their popularity in like pop culture, but more like the respect that other musicians and other people who have taste really respected Radiohead after that album. They earned so. The difficult thing for them was, okay, how do you follow that up? How do you have this massive, successful breakthrough work and then follow that up? And what they did was what set them free, I believe. They released the album called Kid A in the year 2000. And it was just totally different. It was just so different. All the hooks of OK Computer were gone. OK Computer was a very Kid A was a very hook-free album. It was very abstract. It didn't have driving beats for the most part. It was a lot more synthetic, as opposed like synthesized, as opposed to like organic instruments. It was just a total shift of direction. Also a brilliant album. So they were able to pull that off. But when they released Kid A lot of people were super disappointed. They're like, "What are you doing, Radiohead? Like, what is this garbage?" Because it was different. They did something unreasonable. They didn't follow up their mega success with something that would have also probably been a mega success popularity wise, with something that was similar to their successful album. It's something totally different. It was very unreasonable. It's now regarded as a really good album. After the passage of time, people will start to see, okay, this is actually, like, once the shock of it wears off, it's like, okay, this is actually good. But I think that album set them free, because after that, anytime they released an album, people would just be, oh, that's just Radiohead being weird again. They were free to experiment with whatever genre or style that they wanted. They were free because they had been unreasonable. And once you do something unreasonable, then people just sort of expect you to do weird things and crazy things. And it's not so shocking to anyone anymore. So you're allowed to be more you when you are unreasonable. There's a lot of freedom in that. Anyway, have a great weekend, you guys. I'll catch up with you later.